Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics and also a teacher of some 20 years experience. So I'm going to talk about the latest exam grades fiasco in England and Wales, how it's even worse than I thought it was. It has deliberately disadvantaged pupils from already disadvantaged backgrounds, and how also it's going to be falling foul of laws, which means that despite the fact that the government are resisting any further changes to it, they are going to have to. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I'm going to try not to linger on any one point too long, because otherwise this could go on for a while. So effectively, until the results came out yesterday, and by the way, I could have done this video yesterday. The reason I didn't is because some of the effects of it became apparent to me as a teacher, because I got to see it from that side of things. And I didn't want to use that information. I wanted to wait until it had all gone public. So that's what I'm able to do now. But the day before yesterday, here's what I imagined. I imagined what had happened was very similar to what happened in Scotland. And what seemed to happen in Scotland, where it also went badly wrong and after a week the government had to relent, is they'd mapped it onto previous years' results, but haven't not taken into account any sort of affinity bias on the part of unintentional, unconscious bias on the part of teachers, which meant that disadvantaged pupils had been hit harder than other ones. So, and I thought that there'll be no difference in England and Wales. In actual fact, it was worse. So here's the scenario. Teachers were asked, we were asked for predicted grades and a rank order. That's it. That's all the data that the exam boards were given, because that's all they were asked for. So we had to say, you know, give them the list of students in each grade boundary and how we ranked them. So we'd imagine it like this. So let's say you're predicting Bs for, say, 10 students. Now, let's say, and we know that, you know, they're going to map it on previous years as well. So any school or college that tried to game it, maybe you tweak it a little bit, you look for a little bit of flexibility. But anyone that deliberately tried to suggest that this year you were going to get loads better top grades than previous years, you knew you were going to be hit by the algorithm. So that's your own fault. But sensible schools and colleges would have looked at the situation, look, we'll say we would have done a bit better if we genuinely think we would have done, and we think we've got the data to prove it. But let's say you are predicting Bs for 10 students, but the algorithm says, no, only 8 of them would have done. So the way it would have worked is that's where the rank order becomes important, yeah? So the ones who got in your top 8 would have got the B, and the ones at the bottom end that you said would have got a B, but the algorithm says no, would have dropped down to a C. So what you wouldn't have seen, for example, is, let's say you'd predicted those 10 students a B and you'd ranked them. What you would not expect to see is the person that you ranked top. In other words, the person you said, this one absolutely nailed on for a B. On a good day, might have got an A, but I'm predicting a B. Definitely better than all the others I'm predicting a B. You wouldn't expect that student to be downgraded 2 grades down to a D, whereas some of the other ones that you ranked lower still get to keep their C. You would not expect that, would you? But that's what we got. That is what we got. Now, it didn't affect my students personally, because the course I was covering this year was all fine, because it wasn't A-levels. But certainly teachers up and down the country have been reporting this. And we've also seen why, because Ofqual released their methodology. And this methodology takes no account of the ranking at all. So, because here's another thing. Let us imagine that you are that student who was absolutely nailed on for a B. Maybe you were even hoping to get an A if you could have sat the exams. You've been given a D. What do you think? You think your teachers don't like you. Your teachers predicted you at worst a C, because you imagine as well, maybe some people's have been downgraded. You're thinking they've predicted you at the bottom end of a C, whereas in actual fact they predicted the top end of a B. So this put teachers in a very difficult position, because they weren't allowed to just come out and straight, no, they are eventually going to be given the predicted grades, because at the end of the day, particularly sixth form colleges, have been completely shafted by this. And they are going to take the view, look, we're going to share with the students the grades are given, but just can't do it yet. Got to be very careful about it. And so that was a huge surprise to me. That was like, hang on a minute, how is that even possible? And you read through Ofqual, which I'm not going to, sometimes I'll say to you, oh, read this report, it's quite good, it's only a few pages. This is like over 300 pages of statistical methodology, which I haven't read all of it, but I've gone through enough to know that straight away, yeah, they're not even pretending to use the ranking here. We spent a long time trying to come up with those ranks, utterly wasted because they haven't been used. So how is it that this exam board that were only given the predicted grade and the rank, how is it that they know better than the teachers that have been, because they weren't given the assessment data, they weren't asked for it. We didn't hand over assessment data, they didn't want it. How is it that they know better than teachers who would have got that B out of the cohort? They've based it on past performance, their GCSE. So now you've got a scenario where a student, let's say you went to a school that wasn't a very good school, and it didn't really, it taught you the stuff, it had teachers and stuff like that, but didn't really teach you study methodology very well. Or just that it was a nightmare school where all your classmates were idiots. And you didn't do brilliant in your GCSEs. You did well enough because you were bright enough and you worked hard enough and you did well enough to get on to do the A-levels you wanted. But you weren't stunning, you weren't getting the top grades. But let's say you go to a college and the college is a good college and it really taught you. You were taught by specialist teachers because that's a big advantage of a sixth form college. You're taught by teachers who will teach day in, day out that course rather than mixing it up like in a school. And you're really taught how to study as well as the subject content, and you're really progressing on, and you're on a flyer. Doesn't matter. That algorithm has said no. This is why you have seen students from disadvantaged backgrounds not only being predicted A's and A stars, and they've got a place at Cambridge or Oxford, or they did have, and they've been, you know, when they've been completing assessments, they've been getting A's and A stars. All of a sudden, algorithm says, no, you've got a C. You're not getting an A. Have you seen your GCSEs? Absolutely ridiculous. So that was the first level. And the second level, then you read into it and you go, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Because what was then very quickly picked up on is private schools, when you look at the grades being awarded, top grades being awarded compared to previous years, they've made out like bandits. There is a massive surge in the number of top grades being awarded for private schools. Not so for sixth form colleges, which are the state-funded specialists of A-levels. They were hit the hardest of all sectors. And the reason is because the algorithm deliberately, specifically decided to weight against larger centres. In other words, sixth form colleges, the most efficient providers of A-level education. Which also meant that the algorithm biased itself towards private schools. Now, there is no way that that is accidental because there is no good, sound statistical reason for doing so. And also, a bit of a coincidence, when a government run by private school graduates, and it's not just a little bit either, it's a massive amount, massively favoured the independent schools. So straight away, there are equality issues here. And in fact, equality groups are saying that they are going to be taking the government to court over this. But that is not the illegal aspect that I'm going to talk about. Because there is something else, and that is GDPR. Now, this is data protection legislation, which sort of started, it actually caused me some issues, as long as my teaching colleagues as well, because it makes it more difficult, for example, for us to work at home, because there's certain data we're not allowed to just take home and use on our computers and stuff like that. Data protection, fair enough, that's fine, we adapted. But Article 22, I would advise you to look up Article 22 of GDPR. Now, unfortunately, I've been foolish here and not put it up in front of me. But essentially what it says is that you're not allowed to be subject to a purely automated process in a way that has legal ramifications for you. And also what it says is later on, if this thing does happen and if you are ever subject to a fully automated process, that you have the right to human intervention, which is basically someone has to personally look at your thing. Now, the government are saying there is no right of appeal for students. But the law seems to say differently because they have been subject to a purely automated process. If the system, this is the way I read it, I'm not a legal expert. If the system had have used those teacher ranks the way I see it, is then they could have argued it wasn't fully automated because a person has come up with those ranks, their teacher. So if they'd have used, so that way it would have been partially automated, which is okay. Obviously that had to happen. But it's not, because those ranks have been completely ignored. In fact, it looks like the predicted grades, because how do you downgrade someone from an A or an A star down to a C or a D? How do you downgrade someone from a C to failing the course completely? How? I can understand a few people dropping off, like being predicted an E and failing, because I can't imagine too many teachers would have actually predicted a fail for any student under these circumstances, and yet the exam board will know, well, some would have failed. And we'll base it on your past record. But that's not what happened. So it looks to me that they haven't used any of the data that was provided by teachers, which means the whole process was fully automated. Which also means that that student seems to legally, and I have seen a few legal experts umming and ahhing about it. I haven't seen anyone definitively saying, yeah, this is definitely the situation. But I have seen approving nods from the legal profession, suggesting that, they will have the right to an appeal to be heard by an actual person. So anyone that has an issue will, at some point, the government's going to have to accept, because they're going to be taken to court, they're going to have to accept that those students do have a right of appeal. And that is all there is to it. Now, in terms of a couple of other little things to add in there. So, the Good Law Project, which I talk about quite a bit, are also looking at it. But there's also a group called Foxglove. They are actively taking the government to court over this on behalf of a student, I think in Essex or something like that. But they also encourage other students that are affected to contact them. So if you just look up like Foxglove legal challenge to A-level grades or something like that, you'll find it. But then there's another thing that I need to add in. So the so-called triple lock. The government are saying, well, you can apply to use your mock grade, but they haven't explained how that works yet. So there's no guarantee that you will be able to. Or you can resit the exam, which I don't like that language. It's not a resit. A resit is when you've sat the exam, you haven't done very well, or not as well as you'd liked, and then you do it again. Resit. There has been no sit. So the prefix re, get rid of it. It's not there, but they are using it. It's very unfair. But here's my worry. I think people that should be getting A's and A stars and want to resit, to use their terms, the exam this autumn will be unfairly hit two ways. One way is very obvious. They won't have had any tuition for over half a year. So they won't do as well as they would have done in summer had it been a normal year. So there's that, but that's an obvious level of unfairness. There's another less obvious one that would only be obvious to teachers. So normally what would happen in the exam period is the score you need to get a particular grade isn't predetermined. What happens is the exams are sat, then the exam boards mark them, then they analyse the data, then they work out what score needed you to get a particular grade. Because it's a statistical model, they say, right, we need this percentage getting an A star, this percentage getting an A, this percentage getting a B, and so on all the way down, and this percentage failing altogether. It's just based like that. That is just fiddled, basically, so that year on year they can keep it about the same, but they can increase it a bit. And then you get the news going, oh, record number of people getting top grades. As if it's got anything to do with the teachers or students. We all know it hasn't. It's because you change the grade boundaries, like they do every year. But here's the problem. So when they do that exercise in autumn, they won't map it onto how they would normally do that, because they will know the very top students will have already got their A's and A stars in university places, and they won't be sitting the exam in autumn because they're off at university. So you know straight away that the cohort that sits those exams in autumns are first of all those who were downgraded by the algorithm, and it excludes at least a significant proportion. I was going to say majority then, I'd like to think so, but it's certainly a significant proportion of your top achieving students, your A's and A star students, because they got those A's and A stars. So they'll have to, so if they just use the same percentages for each grade boundary, they'll end up inflating the grades of people who take it in autumn. The people who take it this autumn will actually have an advantage. So that's no good either. But how do they know how much to downgrade it by? Because you could probably come up with a figure if you assumed that the algorithm that gave the grades in the first place had done so fairly, but it hasn't. So I fear that people sitting those exams this autumn that should be getting A's and A stars will be unfairly, harshly judged when it comes to that. They'll need an artificially high score to avoid being given an artificially low score to get those grades. So there's that as well. This is a right old mess. The government are going to have to back down on this. I think they've been foolish. Now with Scotland, the situation in Scotland, which was not as serious, I now see, the government held on for a week and then backed down. The government it's not, normally we talk about the Westminster government largely having affairs over English matters. This also includes Welsh matters, because the reason why it's different for Scotland is Scotland has a different education system. So the Scottish government sorts that out. England and Wales both use the same basic system, although Wales got to use modular exams still. So the same Department for Education has had effect in Wales as well. The government will have to back down to some extent. Not necessarily do what Scotland did. I don't know about that. It depends how stubborn they are. There's no way that they're just going to ride this out. Not only are there going to be those legal challenges which just basically constrain them, because it's quite clear they've broken not only equality law, but also GDPR, Article 22, look it up, honestly. But also politically, you know, all the papers are on this. They're all on it. And of course they are, because this is not something that just affects people from working class backgrounds. Even though it's hit those people hardest, this has hit everyone. Everyone. And there's not that many people go to private school. So there's an awful lot of people that read all manner of papers that are pissed off by this, and those papers are getting on board. So the political and the legal pressure for the government to do something will be there. So there it is. I mean, I could go on for much longer. I'm conscious of the fact I've gone on too long already. So I'll leave it there. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.